The tank meta in Mythic Plus is weird. Weirder than the DPS and the healer one, and then we're gonna take a look at why that is, because the tanks are actually fairly balanced with one exception, and that one exception is just making everything worse for everybody. So let's see why that is right now. And we're gonna take a look at Blood Decay, a fairly average tank in terms of all of its performances, particularly in the DPS department as well, and the overall keys that it's doing. It's doing pretty high keys. Actually, all tanks are doing pretty high keys. I think at this point, Blood Decay as an average tank, I'm just gonna quickly put it into C tier to point this out, is doing about 17s, 18s, I believe, maybe even 19s by the time you see this, or even by the time the season ends, which is not too shabby considering some of the highest keys that are cleared right now are 20s, 1 or 2 21s, I believe, at this point anyway. And Blood Decay is not doing too shabby. Obviously, it has the highest amount of HPS out of all of the tanks, which is probably why most people like playing with a Blood Decay, because they don't have to ever cater to it. But it still has some of the same issues and weaknesses where it can just die in like 1 second or less, when, you know, people just call it being global. This particular death, for instance, from Uldaman, I believe, the Blood Decay just dies to like cleave attacks from mobs because it just doesn't have enough time to use a Death Strike to heal it back up, and this all happens just very fast. And of course, this is just mobs because Fortified, as you might see throughout the rest of this video, is what actually kills tanks. Actually, I quite struggled finding the highest tyrannical keys with tank notable deaths. Not really, it's just trash galore, and Blood Decay is no stranger to hating fortified weeks, as to probably most other tanks. But with that out of the way, we can actually look at something that we're going to look at throughout the entirety of this video, which is a particular section of Neltharis, mostly towards the end part of Neltharis, where a lot of the Kalash she adds just do blazing slashes, which kind of nuke a lot of the tanks. Overall, through most of the high keys, this is where tanks usually die the most, or at least the most consistently. I don't have a particular good reason for picking Neltharis, it just happened to be there, and I figured, this is a common occurrence, let's just use this as a reference to kind of rank tanks against each other. Sure, it is a very unique situation, very selective, very specific, and we can just use 10, hundreds other selective, unique, specific situations to rank tanks against each other. But that would just make a tier list 2 hours long, man. Who's gonna watch a tank tier list for 2 hours? We just have better things to do, like playing WoW Remix or other things. But I digress. The issues will still remain, and they will probably have to remain until we actually see the rework first, but also until the entirety of the mitigation system of Blood Decay changes, because if you don't get globaled and killed in that situation, you're essentially OP, which is what we saw happen to Blood Decay at the end of Shadowlands/Sepulchre. You will not be globaled, of course, by following our stream on twitch.tv/Marcelian&Flame, also on YouTube, where we actually stream with you guys a lot of the WoW content that you see in our videos, particularly testing alpha specs in the War Within, doing keys with you raids, and also most notably, most recently as well, a new show that Marcelian and I are doing, where we actually look at all of the news happening in World of Warcraft, discussing them, throwing opinions against each other and seeing what sticks, because we see WoW differently, and actually analyzing and talking about all the changes that are coming to War Within and live as well are really interesting. And then you can also see it live once again on twitch.tv/Marcelian&Flame. Hit a follow, hit a subscribe, whatever you want to do, just go there and be a part of the team, be a part of the community, and to have a chat with us while we talk World of Warcraft, because that is what's sponsoring today's video. And with that out of the way, we can actually segue into Brewmaster. And just to keep people mad, I'll still be putting it into C tier because it is actually the worst performing tank out of all of them. Across the board, it's once again not that bad. It does have its shining moments, particularly its DPS, which I believe it's the highest average out of all the tanks. It has been highest out of all the tanks throughout the entirety of Dragonflight, which is great because it's nice to have a niche, but it's not what's actually carrying Brewmaster to any tier higher than C, unfortunately, as opposed to what might have happened in Shadowlands or BFA even, where tank damage was the king. Considering that some of the biggest barriers that you will face pushing Mythic Plus keys this season is actually surviving the damage, then tankiness comes as a expected requirements to be able to push higher and higher keys. And unfortunately, Brewmaster has probably the least amount of tankiness out of all of them, coupled with the entirety of its kit, because it does have some sustain as well. Stagger is still a pretty good mitigation mechanic, but a combination of its HP pool being particularly tiny with the amount of damage instances that happen. Like, once again, we go to the Nilthara situation where you can just die in a blazing slash and there's not much you can do. Sure, you have some defensives and externals that can help you from other tanks. Maybe you can dodge it. And if not, well, tough luck. You are a C tier tank. Not a C tier tank is actually Guardian Druid, which has been doing surprisingly well ever since its mini tiny multiple reworks throughout the expansion. Obviously, I'm not talking about 10.1.5 when it was just a god, and it's not a god anymore, even though it still has the same tier set. Tier set has been nerfed, and the overall talents have been buffed. But Guardian is still one of the tanks that is doing way better than most other tanks, and the one that closes in the most to the top tier tank spec of the season, which you might know what it is, but I'm not gonna tell you just yet, because we'll get to that as well. Similar to Brewmaster, it is taking quite a bit of damage. However, unsimilar to Brewmaster, is that a word? It does have armor cap, and it can take a lot less melee damage as opposed to Brewmaster, even though magic damage is something that most tanks struggle with. And you can see in this particular damage breakdown that the Blazing Slash that usually kills tanks, although I don't think this particular bear tank died here, it still took quite a bit of damage, and in Niltharis this is usually when bears take the most amount of damage and all tanks take the most amount of damage. Here it's doing a little bit better, probably because it does have some more efficient self-sustain, with Frenzy Regen getting multiple buffs throughout the expansion. Bark Skin being what, I don't know if in this particular build, but usually 40-45 seconds cooldown with a 20 to 30% damage reduction, consistent uptime. It's very good. You can live out a lot of these situations way better than most other tanks, which we're going to keep on ranking below bear because that's where they belong, and Prop Paladin is no stranger to that. It's actually doing better than Blood Decay and Brewmaster. Funny enough, it's actually the am I spoiling if I say this is the third best tank currently, which is great considering that it has the shittiest damage out of all of the tanks overall across the board. Although we kind of know Prop Paladin for having some of the best burst damage while going into a pack with stuff like Divine Toll and just overall shields across the board, and that actually helps Prop Paladin maintain snap threat, where a lot of the DPSers just explode in terms of the overall damage output. Prop Paladin doesn't necessarily have aggro with that. And also, weirdly enough, even though this is a little bit inconclusive still, if we look at the same Niltharis situation, it does have relatively low damage taken per second across the board because it is one of the tankiest tanks, if not the tankiest tanks, but it does have the most amount of conditions to enacting that tankiness. Staying in Consecration, having your Shield of the Righteous up, which is probably the easier one to do, but also having a lot of really good defensives. Doesn't have as good defensives as Prot Warrior though, which doesn't put Prot Warrior ahead of Prop Paladin unfortunately, but it does make it probably slightly tankier or at least more reliable. Like I mentioned also in Niltharis, I was trying to find how this particular section affects some of the top Prot Warriors, but I couldn't find Prot Warriors dying to this. I'm sure if I searched long enough I would find eventually one or more Prot Warriors that died here, but considering that magic damage is a big problem to Prot Warriors, the rest isn't, and block is still king in physical damage mitigation, particularly in melee kind, and you still have Spell Reflect, which is crazy in some of these dungeons, but it does have also the 25 damage reduction from magic attacks present on it, and you could still probably run Spell Block if you so desire to have decent amount of defensives against spell damage, but outside of those, and that's usually when it matters the most, Prot Warrior just topples over on magic damage. And its damage also, in terms of output, is not that great either. It's okay, it's kind of average or slightly below average, I believe, which doesn't bring any particular outstanding niche for people to want a Prot Warrior into their group as opposed to maybe a Prop Paladin or a Bear in this situation. And last, we get to Vengeance, and this is not gonna surprise anybody. It is the best tank, it is S tier, but what might surprise you is why the A tier is currently empty. That's because Vengeance is that much better than all the other tanks. I mean, if we look at the top, I don't know, 100 tanks of, I guess, I don't know, Uldaman, for instance, one particular reason, but we can probably do this for all dungeons. You barely see any other tanks. You see a bear sprinkled here and there with a Prop Paladin as well. But that's about it. It's just mostly purple. And it's a lot of purple. It's not just mostly. It's almost all of it purple. And it has been the case ever since the Vengeance rework, which is a contentious topic to discuss because the rework is actually fun. Vengeance is a fun tank to play, but it is a broken tank to play. And I have only one word to say about that, and that word is parry. What do I mean about parry? Well, let's go back once again to the Niltharis section that I mentioned time and time again, which is probably the main reason as to why I've particularly narrowed in on this particular part of all of the mythic dungeons with all of the trash packs and bosses, because as you may guess, Vengeance should be one of the tanks that is doing the best against magic damage. It has inherent magic damage reduction in its passives. It has decently sustain, not as much as Blood Decay, but it does have a little bit, which usually is what counts against magic damage, considering that tanks don't usually have reliable mitigation against magic damage. And still, in this fight, it took way less melee damage than magic damage. Why? Why? Could it be the parry thing? Yes, it's the parry thing. It's a lot of... It's illuminated sigils and a lot of sigils left and right that just gives it crazy parry across the board. Just to put it into perspective, I've taken this particular section, and it's shorter for Vengeance because the Vengeance group just killed it way quicker. But this particular section has about 2.5 minutes of combat, and during this time, this Vengeance Demon Hunter parried over 108 attacks. That's a lot of parried attacks. Alternatively, a Prot Warrior in the same part of the dungeon in a 4-minute duration combat, because it just took them longer to kill it because they less damage. The warrior parried 39 attacks. It's not really a fair one-on-one comparison, considering that warrior doesn't really have any active way of parrying outside of it's just crit that it's building if you are building your crit, and that's about it. That's probably a good example to take a tank that's not really reliant on parries and put it side by side to kind of show a really big difference. And you might say that, sure, but Prot Warrior has block, which is really good against physical damage, and you would be right, but parry just negates all of it, like all of the damage. Not just the majority of it, but all of it. Yeah, block doesn't do that. But hey, Blood Decay has a lot of parry, if not infinite parry, during Dancing Rune Weapon, right? Right? Take the same situation once again, over 4 minutes of combat. With 4 total casts of Dancing Rune Weapon, Blood Decay just barely gets to Vengeance levels of parry. And Blood Decay is supposed to have this amount of parry. And still it takes Blood Decay almost double the amount of time to just get the same flat number of parries as Vengeance. Sure, I know, parry isn't all of the reasons why Vengeance is so good. The toolkit is just crazy good in dealing with all sorts of situations in Mythic Plus. Double silent sigils, double fear sigils, double grip sigils, and a lot of the damage as well. Plus the sustain, the mobility, and everything that Vengeance has is just crazy good. And I don't really want to see it go, but until things change, this is how it's probably going to look. Either things change for Vengeance, or it gets nerfed into the ground where nobody will be able to play it at all, or tanks get more reworks, hopefully in the War Within, to kind of bridge the gap between where Vengeance is and where the other tanks are. And the reworks are actually incredible coming into the new expansion, and you can check the most recent one that we covered on our channel right here, because some of these reworks are just so good. And we can just hope that we have more coming so that we can just not have empty A tiers anymore. You know what I mean?